There are mechanisms in which we're committed to each other, and then there's mechanisms in which we're not. Short of Monza and a few races, it has not met his or our expectations of what we were expecting. I don't want to say one race at a time because we're not going to one race at a time, but we'll just see how things develop, what he wants to do. Those are the words of Zak Brown when asked about the future of Daniel Ricciardo after his disappointing start to 2022. This carries over from the underwhelming start to life at McLaren in 2021, but now it seems that the conversation has started to shift from what Ricciardo and McLaren can do to improve their future to if Ricciardo and McLaren even have a future in 2023. At the beginning of the year, I made a video talking about Daniel Ricciardo and why people potentially are giving up on him too soon. I said with caution that I had belief in him that he would improve in 2022, but not only was I wrong, but there's even potentially a case that he's actually gone backwards. Now, one reason why Ricciardo's form looks so much worse than last season is because the team has actually fallen back. But even so, when you take a closer look at his performances relative to Norris, it already looks worrying. After 7 races, Ricciardo is down in 11th in the championship on 11 points, whilst Lando is in 7th, but crucially on 48 points already. Qualifying has also been a disappointment, with the current gap after Monaco being 0.421 seconds in favour of Lando. And the only weekend where Daniel did outqualify Lando was in Spain, where Lando was suffering all weekend with an illness. But it's more than just the raw numbers. The actual race performances have also been very worrying. The high point was Australia, where even though Daniel did qualify behind Lando, both teammates in the race were very close, running next to each other, and in the end the team actually held Daniel back because they were already running in a very strong position and didn't want their drivers to fight. But that was the only high point. In Imola, after starting 6th, he had a first lap collision with Carlos Sainz. The car was quick around Imola, and there was a great opportunity to score big points. Lando went on to finish on the podium. In Spain, even though Daniel outqualified Lando, it took just 8 laps for Lando to overtake him, and in his own words, whatever he tried with the car on whatever tyre he was on, he just couldn't extract the same level of performance. Lando went on to finish in 8th. And then in Monaco, on the #1 track where driver confidence and the ability to be at one with the car is more important than anywhere else, Ricciardo, after having a big shunt in practice, just never looked like he was on top of the McLaren. It looked like he was just hanging on and hoping that the track didn't bite again. Lando went on to finish in 6th. To me, the root of Ricciardo's problem can be 3 things, and it's either one of them, 2 of them, or all 3 of them, depending on what you believe. The car, his level of ability right now, and his mental state. In terms of the car, we know that last year's McLaren required a very specific driving style, especially in slow speed corners, where it needed a lot of confidence on the brakes to generate downforce at slow speed, whilst at the same time balancing that with not overdriving so that through the corners a good level of minimum speed could be carried. Now, that video that I talked about earlier that I made, there's something very important that I mentioned that seems to have actually come to pass. I said in that video that even when McLaren figured out what the problem was for Ricciardo in 2021, it doesn't necessarily mean that the fix could be baked into the core aero concept of the 2022 car, because these cars have been in development before the 2021 season even began. However, this is the car that McLaren have, and this is what the drivers need to get the most out of. Both Daniel and the team have said that they're focusing all of their energy on making sure that they understand the issues they're having and helping him in any way they can to improve. But in Formula 1, the performance ceiling of a car has always and will always be judged by what the fastest driver is able to get out of it. In terms of his driving ability, this is the one that's going to be the most subjective. Maybe this is the blind Ricciardo fan talking, but has he really just lost all of his speed and ability in the space of a year and a half? Like, is that it? Should we now compare him to the likes of Stroll and Latifi? That's where it becomes difficult to judge where his speed is now. I understand that he's not on the level of Lando because Lando has proven now that he's got the speed to challenge for a world championship. But then it becomes a Gasly and Albon Red Bull situation where, if we take Alex for example, between his last year at Red Bull and this season at Williams, he hasn't gotten massively quicker. He's just been put in a position and in a car where he's been able to convert his ability into speed and results. And in the same way that Alex never lost that ability, I still don't think that Daniel has all of a sudden become a driver that's not even good enough for Formula 1. However, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Ricciardo was never actually that good, and maybe now he's being exposed and driving at a level he's always been. To me, that's hard to believe even now, but I know there's a lot of people who do have that opinion. However, the biggest problem to me has been his morale and mental state. When you have confidence driving an F1 car, you feel like you're literally unbeatable in the same car. And when you're searching for confidence and trying to convince yourself that you can still find it, you probably feel like Ricciardo does. But what's been interesting is seeing the top brass at McLaren, with both Andreas Seidel and Zach Brown, now start to test Ricciardo mentally and put the screws to him by talking about his contract. In fact, what surprised me most is how much of an open discussion Ricciardo's contract has become. When he signed in 2020, it was believed to be a 3-year deal, meaning Ricciardo would still be at the team in 2023. But now Zach Brown hasn't shied away from talking about those mechanisms which could see Daniel leave at the end of the year. This shift in conversation from we need to improve the car to what Ricciardo's contract is and that he has to decide his future is very interesting. And at the very least, it's showing that both sides are starting to show cracks that they're not afraid to talk about in the open. According to the race's Scott Mitchell, the decision is down to Ricciardo to decide his future for 2023 and if he wants to cut the cord early and opt out. It puts everyone in a really strange situation of who's going to blink first. What does Daniel feel will be the eventual outcome at McLaren? Is it a return to his best, or yet another year in 2023 of really struggling against Norris, at which point McLaren will probably choose not to re-sign him for 2024? This is where I am not going to make any predictions because I genuinely don't know where Ricciardo's head is at. If he believes that he has the full backing of the team despite them now starting to mention his contract, then that's where he's at. But we're 7 races into 2022, and the vibe at McLaren is already starting to get very weird. Of course, if Daniel does decide to call it a day at the end of 2022 and move on, that leaves McLaren with more than enough drivers that will be fighting for that seat. Colton Herta, the 22-year-old American IndyCar driver, has already been a bigger and bigger presence at the team, and don't underestimate how much Zach Brown would love to have an American driver. Commercially, with all of these new races in the US, for the McLaren brand, this would be a big coup. McLaren has already been flirting with the idea of using an IndyCar driver, and Ricciardo is more than aware of the McLaren-Herta connection. As far as F1, the McLaren seat is perfect in every single way for Pierre Gasly. Gasly has been waiting for 2 years for an opportunity at a good team to properly restart his career outside of Red Bull. And I have no doubts whatsoever that someone in the Gasly camp has already approached McLaren about Pierre's availability. A rogue choice of Fernando Alonso could also be considered by McLaren as a short fix. Fernando has that prior relationship with Zach Brown and McLaren already, and I think Fernando is starting to feel the walls closing in, with Piastri probably replacing him at Alpine in 2023. As far as Ricciardo, I just don't believe that his ability has just vanished. If he wants to look for another seat, there is plenty of teams that I can think of that he improves overnight, replacing Latifi at Williams, Schumacher at Haas, Zhou at Alfa Romeo, and Stroll at Aston Martin. In fact, the latter, I think, could be a seriously exciting teammate reunion with Seb and Daniel at Aston Martin, although Lance Stroll's lifetime contract could be an issue. The clock is now ticking, and it's going to be both sad and intriguing to see what potentially will happen next in the Ricciardo and McLaren story. Well, there you have it, another video in the bag. If you did enjoy this one, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel, that would be greatly appreciated, and I'll see you in the next one.